On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, we have an update on that collision between the Chinese Navy and the Chinese Coast Guard. I'm your host, Tom Cogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, a lot of traction for that video on what happened between the Chinese vessels off the coast of the Philippines. So much attention that it's actually my fourth most popular video out there. So I appreciate everybody tuning in, but a lot of questions about some of the issues that happened in that video. Plus, there's new video out there with the Chinese trying to blame the Philippines for the collision. We're going to break that down for you and also talk about what is that right there underneath the bow of the Chinese destroyer. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. So here's the latest story from Bloomberg over at G Captain. The China and Philippines trade blame over the collision in contested seas, with each side blaming the other for it. So much so that the Chinese actually put out a video where they kind of show it's the Philippines' fault, but without ever showing it's the Philippines' fault. All right, this video is from the Global Times, and right off the bat, that should tell you something about the veracity of this video. But I want to show it because it's being shared a lot on social media. So this shows you the Chinese Coast Guard cutter on the left there. This is the former Type 056 Corvette of the PLAN, the People's Liberation Army Navy, the Chinese Navy, pursuing after the Philippine Coast Guard cutter. Now, I do like this video for a couple of reasons, not the least of which it shows you the scale of the difference between the Coast Guard cutter Luzon of the Philippines versus the Chinese former Navy vessel chasing after him. The Philippine Coast Guard ship 4406, they don't call it the Luzon, conducted highly dangerous maneuvers on Chinese law enforcement vessels during its intrusion into waters near China's Huangyan-do, this is Scarborough Shoal, in the South China Sea on August 11th. Just a quick note here, too. Everybody was getting mad for a variety of reasons for whatever I call something, whether it's the South China Sea, the West Philippine Sea, someone's going to get pissed off at me. And I call it the South China Sea just because of habit. I sailed through the South China Sea. It's a habit. I'm not taking sides here. We can call it the West Philippine Sea. We could just call it the sea. That may be easier. So I'm not trying to get everybody fired up. So here you have August 11th, Scarborough Shoal in the West Philippine Sea. So I'm going to pause it here because their texts are extremely fast. So ignoring repeated dissuasion and warnings from the Chinese side, the Philippines organized multiple types of vessels to insist on intruding into waters near China's Huangyan-do, Scarborough Shoal, under the pretext of delivering supplies to fishing boats. They were delivering supplies to fishing boats. Through the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea that says Scarborough Shoal is within the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. Again, this territory is only 100 miles west of the main island of Luzon. So here you see the Philippine vessel maneuvering. During the incident, the Philippine Coast Guard ship 4406 made multiple high-speed crossing maneuvers in front of the bow of Chinese Coast Guard ship 3104, one of the video clips showed. Now, the ship does turn. If you go back here a bit, we're going to back this up here a minute. You see that the Philippine vessel does begin to make this turn. Now, the Philippine vessel under rules of the road should maintain course and speed if this is an overtaking situation. This is not an overtaking situation. This is a Chinese vessel running down the Philippine vessel. So that kind of negates coal regs and the international, rules of the road, so to speak. Goes on here, Chinese experts slammed that the Philippine ship's maneuvers severely compromised the navigation safety of the Chinese vessel and seriously violated the most basic principles and rules of maritime navigational safety. Now, the Chinese vessel can back off at this point. They don't need to be running down the Philippine vessel. They make the argument that they're chasing the Philippine Coast Guard cutter out of the 12-mile area around Scarborough Shoal. Now, what the Chinese kind of conveniently leave out of this video, but this is provided by the Philippine Coast Guard, is here is that pursuit being done again. Can't help but notice the 2,000 gallons per minute of water shooting out of the side of the Chinese Coast Guard cutter that is running down the Philippine Coast Guard cutter. That amount of water hitting a vessel can cause damage to the ship, could cause physical damage and injuries to the crew, could actually sink. And notice here how the Philippine vessel is turning at this point. It's turning to the right. You can see the corvette crossing over the wake of the vessel. It is trying to evade away, but here the Chinese Coast Guard vessel continues the pursuit. Again, this is not rules of the road. This is showing wanton destruction and danger for the vessel. I'm going to pause it right here. So while this vessel was coming across the stern, on the other side, a PLAN, a Chinese Navy vessel, had made its appearance. And this is where you wind up with the collision where the Chinese Navy vessel crosses directly between the Philippine vessel and the Chinese vessel, causing that collision. And we went into detail talking about all the maneuvers in the last video. What I want to do is talk about a couple of other issues that are here, in particularly something that grabbed a lot of people's attentions. So we're going to go with a little bit of a higher quality image right here. So I want you to take a note of something here on the bow of the Chinese corvette. First off, crew members. We have crew members up here. You see them putting this fender. At least 2, if not 3 crew members up on the bow with life jackets on. Other thing I want you to take note of here, the bow of the corvette. Right here below the bullnose, that's the bullnose right there. This is where you would put out a line through the front of the vessel in case you were towing it or tying up. Right below there is an anchor. This is where the anchor drops. It is a forward anchor that's going to go over the bow and drop. Up forward on vessels, typically what you'll have up here in the region of the bow is some dead space and some locker space. In particular, you would have what's called the bosun's locker. You might have the paint locker, a lot of hazardous material, a lot of gear stored up here. Plus, down here in the forward part, down here low in the vessel is going to be the anchor chain, because that anchor chain is going to run up onto deck, onto the windlass, and back down. The reason I say all that to you is because of this. This is the image we see right here of that collision. And one of the things that grabs a lot of people's attention right here is this kind of dark material that we see right here. A lot of people are making the kind of the idea that this is those crew members on the bow being kind of obliterated and disintegrated. I'm not saying that's not what that is, but I severely doubt it for this reason. Number one, that's a lot of material you're looking there, and human bodies tend not to explode like that. This is a force where the bow of the corvette runs into the side of the destroyer. Those crew members would have been thrown forward and slammed into the side of the destroyer, the port side of the destroyer. What I tend to think that what we're seeing here is, as we back this up again, you'll notice right here, you see some kind of debris in the water here. This is the bow of the vessel coming apart. This is probably anchor chain. Whenever you drop an anchor chain, you get all the rust, steel and rust flakes coming off. If you ever see that happening, you'll see it occur. All this, you've got all that material there in the bow. And what I think you're seeing is just that bow being disintegrated there and coming apart. Yeah, that's darker material. I don't think it's blood or body material. It could be some in there, don't get me wrong. But it's definitely material from the bow of the vessel that is coming out. And so I just wanted to quantify that, because I think a lot of people are assuming that. Now, based on the fact that there were extensive searches done right after this event, I do think that those crew members on the bow have lost their lives. Fast forward to some of these still photos. If you look down here low on the vessel, you'll see some red. Potentially that is a life jacket. Again, those crew members were wearing those type of life jackets. If we go forward here just a little bit, you'll see crew members there with those life jackets on. Potentially we're seeing those life jackets there in the water. Notice again that bow wave. That is the bow underneath the water, still pushing through the water. You'll notice the anchor right there. All the bow collapsed down. This is probably, again, material that was busting out from the vessel. All that steel that was there had to go somewhere. It was mashed up against the bow of the destroyer. You basically had the bow almost explode when it hit with such force. This looks like the bow just literally crumpled up here and smashed it in, which means that the insides here between this section of the vessel and the bow have crumpled up and blown out. Second issue I want to talk about is why this happened and how this event kind of conflicted with a series of other events. So this story over at Reuters on G-Captain, the Philippines and India hold their first joint sail in the South China Sea. This follows on the heel of a state visit in New Delhi by President Ferdinand Marcos of the Philippines. Goes on here, the Philippines has conducted, quote, maritime cooperative activities, unquote, with foreign navies since 2023. Philippine military chief Romeo Brawner said the idea for a 2-day joint sail, which started on Sunday and was inside the Philippines exclusive economic zone, came about when he met his counterpart in March. Brawner told reporters, quote, we did not experience any untoward incidents, but there are still those shadowing us as we have already expected. So this comes on the heel of that joint sail between both the Indian Navy and the Philippine Navy. Then we get this story over at USNI News. China drills in South China Sea during Philippine-Indian Navy patrols. So we're seeing the Chinese reacting to this. Beijing ramped up Navy and Coast Guard activities in the South China Sea over the last week to counter Manila's recent patrols. The PLA held routine patrols from Friday to Monday in response to joint patrols between the Philippines and non-regional countries, the PLA Southern Theater announced. India recently held its first patrols with the Philippines. The INS Delhi, the Kiltan, the Shakti rendezvoused with the BRP Jose Rizal and the BRP Miguel Malvar on Sunday for the joint patrol. So at the same time, we had this story also over at USNI News. Irregular Chinese flotilla spotted up in the Luzon Strait. Now, this is north of the Philippines between the northern island of Luzon and Taiwan. Flotilla of 3 Chinese cutters were spotted near the waters of Manila's northernmost island. Manila began monitoring the formation on Thursday as it approached Batanes, a remote island chain between the Philippines and Taiwan. I should note that the U.S. Marine Corps is conducting operations in those islands with proposals to station Marines of the new Marine Littoral Regiment up in that area. The agency utilized its Canadian-provided dark vessel detection system to detect and observe 3 cutters, the Haling, the Dahao, and the Zhangjiang. Philippine Coast Guard spokesman Commodore J. Torella said in a statement. Minutes listed in the release show that the flotilla exclusively consisted of Zehao-class large patrol vessels, 110-meter-long cutters in the Chinese Coast Guard. That is what depicted here. These Chinese Coast Guard cutters are massive vessels. These are not your tiny little Coast Guard cutters you see running around inlets in and around the United States. So you got the Chinese conducting military exercises. You've got Chinese cutters up north of Luzon. The U.S. wanted to demonstrate its solidarity with the Philippines, so it dispatched the U.S. Navy destroyer Higgins from a port visit at Cebu City in the southern Philippines and sent it up on a freedom of navigation operation, basically sail close to Scarborough Shoal. This comes from Ian Ellis. Well, the Chinese announced that they chased off the warship, the Higgins, from Scarborough Shoals. I don't think you can really chase something off that's just sailing through, but that's the Chinese. So this is a big escalation in the confrontation between Philippines and China. Obviously, China does not like the Philippines enacting with India. Understand, India is a nation that gives China a lot of concern. Hop over here to marine traffic. This is Scarborough Shoal right here. You can see we're not seeing as much traffic around Scarborough Shoal right now. Now this is AIS, automatic identification system. The system may be off, although we do have a Chinese Coast Guard cutter 3305 showing. Although we do have a BRP vessel, the Cape San Augustine, showing it. But again, just about 100 miles west of Luzon. But the issue for China is this. Philippines and India sailing together creates a big problem for China because so much Chinese cargo comes out of the Philippines, sails right here, this huge kind of sail line right past the Philippines, comes out of Singapore through the Malacca Straits, and a great deal of it sails here in the Indian Ocean, comes out of the northern end, just north here of Sumatra, south of Andaman Islands, which is an Indian territory. India sits here and has the ability to choke off Chinese trade should they want to it. The Philippines is in a very similar position too. And so the Chinese always like to kind of exert themselves. And I think this is the reason we're seeing this new escalation with cutters sailing up here between Taiwan and Luzon, confrontation off Scarborough Shoal. All of this is part of a larger geopolitical entity that the Chinese want to demonstrate that they are concerned about their trade routes. This goes back into the 2010s when Chairman Xi announced the Belt and Road Initiative and the really big expansion of Chinese trade going on. So this is a issue that we're going to keep following here at what's going on with shipping. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a big thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you can hit that super thanks button down below, contribute directly to the page, or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. Till the next episode, this out.